Shalom. Made a video earlier today just speaking about my thoughts on prayer, fasting, that sort of thing. And since making that video, the Father's, I guess, been, kind of reminding me about things and conversations that He's had with me in the past and things that have happened in my life in the past. And I thought I might add a few thoughts to what I said earlier. I mentioned in that video that a lot of times it's difficult for people who don't understand how to hear the Father to really understand what you mean when you say that God told you something. God told me that I should do this or that. And for me, it was always like, well, how did He tell you? Did you hear Him? Well, no, I didn't hear Him. It's just, He just spoke to me. Okay, that I have no way to understand what you just said, back then. And it was very difficult for me to find someone that could really present that information in a way that I could understand. One of my friends directed me to a gentleman named Mark Verkler. What he said in his videos, he has a series of videos on how to hear God's voice, but what he said is in his videos is also what Kepha says in the Nazarene homilies or the Clementine homilies. He said that you know the Father's speaking to you when it's a spontaneous information that comes from nowhere. Like it's just wisdom that just appears in your head. And so after listening to Verkler's videos and reading what Kepha said in the homilies, I realized over time that the Father had been speaking to me my whole life, and I didn't realize it. I thought it was just conversations I would have with myself in my head. So I presume that most people are like this. I don't know other people's thoughts, but my whole life, if I had any situation in my life where I was trying to figure out what to do, the way I would do that was by thinking through something with in my mind, logically working through whatever puzzle I was trying to work on. So in my brain, when I would think and reason with myself, I would think in sentences, like speaking in your head in a sentence. Like my thought would be like, should I go and do this? Well, if I go do this, then this other thing's going to happen or whatever. Sometimes when I would ask myself a question in that way in my mind, suddenly, not that I would hear the sentence come back, but it would just be like instantly it was there. The response was instantly there even though I didn't hear it. I can remember when I was in second grade, I was going to a private Catholic little parochial school for grade school, and that in that lesson they were speaking about the Sabbath, and so we read the passage from Exodus chapter 20 where it says, remember the seventh day to keep it holy. And I know it was in first or second grade because I know the classroom that I was in at that point. And after class, we got, a little break. And so we go to the bathroom, go to the water fountain or whatever. And when I walked out of the classroom, the Father was like, or this thought came into my head where I was like, well, wait a minute, Sunday's the first day of the week. Why did it say the seventh day of the week? And so when I got back to class, I asked the nun that taught the class, I asked her about it. And of course she gave the standard, well, we changed it routine, and that Jesus came and changed it to Sunday, and that the Saturday is for the Jews. And so now we keep Sunday, and that's the reason why. That's just the way it is. I remember not being satisfied with the answer, but I was in second grade. It's not really anything I could have really done about it. But it was a seed that the Father planted. And so then when I came to more of a Hebraic roots understanding, it was very easy for me to accept that right away because I knew it to be truth because the nun had taught it to us. So when somebody said, well, Yeshua never changed the Sabbath to Sunday, and I realized that was true, and I realized that I had been deceived, and I changed my behavior. And so that whole time, Father has always worked on me, and He's always taught me more, and I've learned to be better about recognizing His voice once I realized that's what it was. But for years, he had been speaking to me and he had been instructing me, and I did not understand it. Another time that I remember, one that probably more profoundly changed my life than anything else, was when I was like 16 or 17. Sunday morning, I was sitting in church with my family, and I had this spontaneous thought come into my head. Now, if you've never been to a Catholic Mass, it's very dry, it's very boring, very dull. And the spontaneous thought that came into my head was, this is just as boring for God as it is for you. And my response was, well, why did God demand us to tell us to do this? Why did he tell us we have to go to church every Sunday if this isn't fun for him either? The response I got back in my head was, what makes you think that he asked for any of this? That conversation in my head deeply and profoundly affected the way I viewed religious services. Now, that being said, I do think that there is a place for liturgy. I do think that it helps to kind of bind the congregation together. But Yeshua, when he came, what I see now in the Gospels is I see him teaching a personal relationship with the Father. I don't see him teaching ritual or liturgy, aside from a very short prayer, the Our Father. But in his day, the temple was a center of religious worship, and I honestly believe that Yeshua came to bring that worship back to the people and take it out of the hands of the religious establishment, and that's the reason the religious establishment killed him. And in the Hebraic roots movement now, the Jewish roots movement, we are going back to this very class of people that killed him. And again, I'm not talking about the Jews. I'm talking about the religious establishment of Judaism, the high up popes and pontiffs of Judaism, the leaders within that religion. It was not fishermen from Galilee that killed Yeshua. It was not a Jewish farmer from the Decapolis that killed Yeshua. It was the religious hierarchy that killed him, and the Herodians. The very people that Paul was friends with were the people that killed Yeshua. There's this unfounded statement that Christians have made in the past, to call Jews Jesus killers, and that's not accurate. It's not the Jewish people that killed him. The Jewish people loved him and followed him. It was the religious establishment. So don't think in any respect whatsoever that I'm coming against the Jewish people. I'm coming against the religion of Judaism. The people who wrote the Mishnah were not fishermen from Galilee. The people who wrote the Talmud were not Jewish farmers from the Decapolis. It was the religious hierarchy, the professional religious, Pharisees and Sadducees that wrote these documents. And there are Hebraic roots teachers now that are saying that we have to interpret everything that Yeshua said and taught through what Rashi said, or the Rambam, or whoever, like these religious Jewish leaders. I reject that. I don't believe we have to go to the people that killed Yeshua and follow their doctrine in order to follow Yeshua. I just don't. And in the same way that the Father asked me that question, what makes you think that God asked for this, when I was sitting in that Catholic service, is also what I envision now when it comes to temple worship Judaism. When they're in there slaughtering animals and going through their rituals, it makes me wonder, what in the world makes us think that God asked for this? Consider the source. are we following Yeshua? Are we following the priests? Yeshua told us to go into our prayer closet to seek the Father, we didn't have to go to temples. I don't believe it was ever the Father's desire to build a temple. I certainly don't believe it was ever his desire to have, bloody animal sacrifices. Now, a lot of people have rejected that message that I try to teach, but nevertheless, that's what the Father's taught me. What does God desire of us? Does he want ritual? Does he want us to, come in and say a certain set of prayers and make sure we always worship the same way and we always go to synagogue and such and so forth? I don't believe so. I believe that what Yah wants is he wants a personal relationship with each of us. I believe that if Yah had a choice between all of his people going to church every Sunday or going to synagogue every Saturday versus all of his people spending 2 hours every Shabbat to go into their prayer closet, to gather together as a family, and spend 2 hours in prayer with him. I believe he'd rather have that than us going to a house of worship. That's my belief. I believe that if he could have us staying home as a family, playing praise music and singing to him every Shabbat, that he would choose that. I've gotten into the habit of listening to a lot of gospel music lately. Like, I really like the old Southern gospel type of music. It reminds me of going to my grandmother's little one-room Methodist church and the hymns that they would sing there. The times of my week where I feel most connected to the Father is when I go and I pull up either iTunes or YouTube and I put it on some gospel music and sing along with it, play it in the house. Or when I spend time praying with him, I'll walk outside a lot of times at night and just walk around the driveway praying to him. The time I spend fasting, and it's not always me fasting because I want something. A lot of times it's just me denying myself because I want to show the Father that I'd rather pray than eat. And if we could do that, if we could get back to that. I said on that other video today, I said, if you fast for one day in your life, you will have fasted one day more than 95% of the Christians out there. And it's not right. I believe if we were to get back to fasting and praying and praising the Father, even if we didn't go to any kind of central worship service, if we were just worshiping at home with our family, spending time in prayer, I believe that would make a bigger change in this world than anything else. And I believe that would change his heart quicker than anything else. I've seen the effects of prayer. I've felt the effects that it has on me when I spend time with him. When me and my family were in the process of moving, there was a period there for about a month where my family was living in Knoxville and I was living in Birmingham because I was working here and I would go back on the weekends or they would come back with me or whatever. But there was one weekend where they had actually come down to Birmingham during the week, and then we were going to drive back up to Knoxville. And we were on a little bit of a time crunch to get back to Knoxville. And we were not really running late, but we were like borderline going to be late getting home and we had this other appointment to make. And we were coming up the interstate between Chattanooga and Knoxville, and traffic just stopped, bumper to bumper traffic. And I pulled out my iPhone and looked at the map, and it'll show you how far traffic is backed up. And that line from Chattanooga to Knoxville was just red. It was backed up miles and miles and miles, like 15 miles. And I was like, geez, we're not going to make it back in time. So we sat there for a few minutes, and I put on a CD. It was a David Crowder CD, in which David Crowder, his music, I really like his music, but he kind of mixes up his stuff with these old gospel hymns. And so you'll have like one of his songs and then some classic gospel song, and then another one of his songs and then another classic gospel song. And so we started playing it, me and the kids and the wife, we were all singing along to it. All of a sudden traffic starts moving. So the lane that we're in the right lane, and it's just going. We get up to like 60 miles an hour, just that traffic is just going and going and going and going for miles, as long as we're singing. As soon as the music ended, as soon as we stopped singing, the traffic stopped moving again. Pulled the phone out, looked at it again, and it still showed us backed up for 15 miles. But somehow, we were able to travel like 10 miles, just 60 miles an hour on a interstate where the other traffic in the left lane was just completely stopped. Our lane was the only one moving, and we drove for like 10 or 15 minutes, and we ended up sitting right next to the exit we had to take. So I just got off on the shoulder, drove maybe a quarter mile down this shoulder of the road and took the exit, and we ended up making it where we needed to be on time. The point of that story is we were in an impossible situation. I don't know how the Father was able to open up that traffic and get it to go, but it started moving when we started singing praise to Him. And it stopped the moment that we stopped. And it was just a, coincidence that the music stopped when we were sitting right next to the exit that we had to get off of. There are no coincidences. A coincidence is just Yahuwah choosing to remain anonymous. But in the same way, there's power in prayer, there's power in fasting, and there's power in praise. So my point is this. I've been given blessings by praying, fasting, and praising. I've never been blessed. I've never been given some unexpected miracle because I went to a ceremony and followed along in the in the booklet for the service and said all the prayers that everyone else was saying. And when all else fails, sometimes mountains can be moved by just sticking in a David Crowder CD and singing along at the top of your lungs to "I Saw the Light." Never discount miracles. And when you find yourself in a situation that there's no other way out, just turn to the Father. Praise Him. Pray to Him. And remember that everything in this world works according to His will. And staying in His will is the key. Thank you, and shalom.
Praise the Lord, I saw the light.